Okay, here we go. This is the last video in this series because this is all the screen capture I got. And this time we're going to dress the fairy. And here you see me sculpting a leaf that I'm going to use for her clothes. This is the master leaf. And I'm going to copy it, Shift D, and put it around the body where I need to. And next, here you go, comes up a little flower that I made that I did it in another file. I'm importing it in, and now I'm booleaning the thing together so I have one solid piece to move around. And here you go, see me placing them on her body. Now, honestly, this I'm just sort of designing on the cuff. I'm just figuring it out as I go along. And in some cases that works out fine. In other cases, it doesn't always work out. I've found that, major things like body positions are very hard to alter once you've got most of it in place. Like if I decided I didn't like this position and I had to redo the entire thing, I'd have to start from scratch. Technically, you can bend the limbs and stuff. I know there are tools to do that, but I'd wind up resculpting half the thing anyway, so. And you can see I'm just placing the leaves on her body and making it conform to her body, partially, to look like gravity is affecting them, but also because I didn't want anything sticking up and away from the body, like in midair, because that would cause a support problem. And always, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about how I'm going to support and print and clean up the piece afterwards. I want everything as easy as I can make it. And while I won't sacrifice, the looks of the piece for that, it's always a thought that I keep in the back of my head that I want to work on, to make it the easiest I can without sacrificing the look of the final piece or, the way things make sense. And here you can see on this one, I've added vertices to it so I can bend it a little easier. I'm adjusting the flowers here just so everything fits the way I'd like. I think I make little tweaks. I do a lot of tweaks here and there to set things up and make sure they're all right and I'm happy with them. There's a lot of little tweaks I always do all the time. I'm a tweaker. And setting making them conform to the body so it looks like gravity is affecting them. Also, I was conscious of the thickness of this. Now, I always mention this because it's always a thing to keep in mind. There's no point of reference on as concerning size on this, right? You've got nothing to go by. This model could be sculpted at 2 inches or 2,000 inches. You got nothing to compare it to. So I always keep an eye on the numbers, just so you know what you're dealing with. I was always going to resin print this. I didn't mind doing them thinner, but I wanted them a realistic thickness, yet not so thin that they would be, too delicate to withstand handling. And also, this is a fairy, so I wasn't going to go crazy with the outfit. I see fairies as mystical creatures, and they're not realistic, and they don't have the same ideas as humans do. So the fairy doesn't really care how she's dressed. However, this was a piece I hoped to sell, so I didn't want it to look too lewd or anything. So we basically cover the essentials and, move on. I wanted her to look cute. Maybe I wasn't going for super sexy, though. You know what I mean? I didn't want it to be too sexy, because that wasn't really the point of this. And you'll see that little disc that she's sitting on, that's to stand in place for the cork that you can see in the picture in the lower right hand side. So I had a good idea of the plane that she was going to sit on. What I don't have in any of the screen captures is that little sort of bed of leaves that she's sitting on. I don't know what happened to the screen capture of that or why I didn't make it. I do have some of the butterfly in an earlier video. I think it's part 1 of this series. It shows you how I made the butterfly. So you can look back to that if you want to see it. And here you go. I'm sculpting in the breasts. But don't worry, YouTube. There's no real detail in here. We're not freeing anything, if you get my drift. just putting in the basic shapes so that she looks female. Um, and that's really all the detail I'm going to give those. See, I've already moved on. We're not even on the chest. I'm doing the eyebrows. And the funny thing with this eyebrows is I used to do comic stuff. And this is pretty much exactly the way I drew eyebrows when I did comic figures. I always think it's funny. I want to work on a little more realistic version of eyebrows. Maybe have it look more like hair. Maybe I'll sculpt them a little bit. I gotta mess around with that and see what works. But this was a small enough figure that this was good enough. And you can see they're very thick, but most of that thickness is inside the head, so it doesn't really show. I just wanted them thick enough on the outside so that they were noticeable. You know, there as eyebrows. And I really like the way the face came out on this one. It's a really nice face. Oh, and here you see an example of where this just ain't working. I tried to do, you know, a flower bra, and with these, I just really didn't like the way it worked out. It kind of looks a little like a lei, and I wanted to stay away from that. I don't think that kind of works. You know, a Hawaiian lei. I don't really think that works on a fairy, so you see I very quickly got rid of it right there. And went along with something else and thought about it a bit, and came back and tried it a different way. Adjusting thicknesses a little bit here and there so everything seems uniform and thick enough not to give me an issue. And you got to remember, what looks thick at this scale is not really that thick. These leaves were very thin. Even though it looks like I'm chunking them up, by the time they print, it's a whole different world. Now, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll add a cube, and I'll use that to measure thickness and whatnot. And I know there's a measurement system in Blender, but I never really found it convenient to use. So I just toss a little cube in there and here and there and use that to judge thickness and size and whatnot. And here's my second attempt at a top for her, making it conform to her chest. I did try at one point to use like a twig sort of thing or a branch thing underneath to kind of hold the leaves in place on the bottom, but it wasn't really working. So I just mainly went with this. I'm always fixing up and tweaking and making things work out. I want, the other stuff, I want all of this to conform to the body so there's no weird voids, so there's no problem with supporting things. And it all worked out really, really well in the end. This wasn't a super difficult piece to support and clean up. You can see I'm making things a little thicker. There was my first red shift. That's my graphics card. Not holding up, I think. Oh, now we're moving on to hair with curves. I have a hair with curves video that I was working on, and I wasn't going to post it because there are so many hair with curve videos. Why do I need to add another one to the mix? But I ran into a bunch of trouble when I first tried hair with curves, and I just want to tell people about some of the issues I had to resolve because I didn't see them in any of the other videos that I had looked at, any of the other tutorials, and maybe it's just me, the weird way I do things, but it took me a little bit to get things to work, and I still revert to that video myself. Oh, there goes Redshift again. My poor computer. It's really working overtime for me, and I appreciate that. And there's a lot of fiddling and twiddling about with the hair to get things just right, to get it to look like hair, because you're basically, I see it as an illusion, like a magic trick. We're trying to make these long locks look like individual hairs stuck together, kinda. And I like things to flow a certain way, and I have found that if you overlap these locks too much, there's always a problem when you try to Boolean things together. And I always like to make my last, the very final thing, a one solid STL of everything all Boolean together. I don't like loose little pieces or anything like that. So I do like to join everything together into one solid STL. And hair can be tricky sometimes. There's a lot going on there, and it can be difficult to Boolean. Blender's Boolean modifier has come a long way since version, I don't know, 2.8, but it's still not super perfect. That's also another video I wanted to do with some of my Boolean tricks, but we'll get to that. And here you can see me adjusting the hair. I don't want anything like sticking through these meshes unnaturally, because once again, I think that will ruin the illusion that this is hair. If you have anything, in a weird way. Like I went out of my way to make a part for that ear so the hair flows around it. It doesn't just stick out in the middle of one of those locks, because that would break the illusion and it would not look like hair. So you want to try and keep that up. And I also like my swoopy shapes. I'm very big on swoopy shapes. It's weird. There's a sort of line I kind of walk where, you look at the way hair realistically flows, and then you look at what's interesting to look at, and you kind of come up with a balance between the two, if that makes sense. Because sometimes reality can be boring to look at. So you want to jazz it up a little bit, but you still want it to be realistic. You see the wings popping up right there? That was, once again, too much for my card and my computer. I don't know which it is, really. That's why I like to keep them hidden. I found that if you hide parts of the mesh you don't need to work on, it seems to make it easier for the computer to handle. I don't know whether it, because it doesn't have to render a part of the mesh, it doesn't need as much computing power. But hiding certain parts that you don't need at the time seems to help me a lot. And I do have an ancient computer by computing standards. And I wanted also, you see the wings appear and disappear a lot, because I wanted the hair to flow around them, right? I wanted to make sure that the hair wasn't, or the wings weren't cutting into those lock meshes. I wanted the hair to just flow around it, because once again, that would break the illusion. So we want to keep things looking good. Just more tweaking and moving around. A lot of times I will just Shift D to copy a lock, because for the most part the previous lock has most of the positioning I need for the next one. Not always. A lot of times there's some adjusting and whatnot to do, but that's just part of the game. However, it's easier than starting from scratch with a totally straight lock where everything has to be adjusted and tweaked and modified. Using the last one does at least cut down on 50% of the work. Here you go, trying to get my swoopy shapes in. And we're coming to the end of the hair. Let's see where we are. Oh yeah, we're almost done with this. So we're coming to the end of the hair, and that'll kind of wrap things up with this. I can tell that either I stopped making screen captures or I will misplaced some, because all of a sudden the head and the neck, the head and the wrists are joined to the body mesh, where they weren't if you look at the beginning of this. So I don't really know for sure. It's like a year ago when I did this. So I don't remember why I'm missing part of this, part of the build. We're closing in on the end here. We're almost done. It's a lot of little tweaking. You see how the angles at the top of the head, it's all the angles of the locks at the top of the head have to kind of go in with the skull, so it looks like the hair is coming out of the head. And mostly, while this is not the way hair actually works, I do mainly straight hair, mostly because curly hair would be difficult to support and clean up. If you have lots of little curly things that end in midair, you have to support all of that, and it makes it harder to support and clean up, and it makes little delicate parts on the model that are just, gonna break. But that's all for the fairy. If you have any questions, please, write down in the comments. I'll be glad to help if I can. And, do the old like and follow thing. I'd appreciate it. Okay, see you next vid.